Today, we're looking at James Blake's production secrets. The man's so well respected that even Frank Ocean called him to work on Blonde. Unfortunately for us, he's a master of the piano, sound design, and pretty much everything difficult in music. However, I spent the past week figuring out his techniques so you can easily use them in your own production. This song utilizes James's go-to method that will make your chords sound like the pros. This is a standard G# minor 7 in its original voicing. What we want to do first is put it in a closed position, meaning all the notes are as close together as they possibly can be. Then we can make it a drop 2 chord by taking the second note from the top and moving it down an octave, hence the name drop 2. But why does James do this? Well, first, spreading your chords across these open voicings makes them feel bigger, filling a wider frequency range and adding to that ambience that James is known for. Second is that it creates this space separating the top note from the rest of the chords. Without going into too much very complicated music theory, essentially the highest note, also known as a soprano, is the voice in a choir that our ear recognizes as the main melody. Now, it's all well and good having these chords, but it's what James does to them that, if used correctly, is something that will separate your music from everyone else, because most people are flat out scared to do it. Discordance, by definition, is the quality of sounding harsh and jarring because of a lack of harmony. Now, I know you're thinking, I don't want my music to sound harsh or jarring. Well, that's why it's called the discordant edge, because we want to take our sound as far as possible without it sounding bad. We'll begin with the obvious, which is detuning. You can hear that on the piano in Don't Miss It, and I replicated it using some transparent compression, a sketch cassette, and reverb. This sounds good, but we can push it further. So I went back to the song I just played for some inspiration. This song walks a constant tightrope of almost being out of key, with these pitch shifting elements like the vocals you just heard. We'll get to that in a second, but first, the piano needs a little bit more work. The detuning we've applied is pretty standard, and it sticks to the rule I usually go by, which is to not push sounds further than 30 cents. However, to get to that discordant edge, that's something we need to do. So I set this knob on the piano to 1 semitone and created an automation clip. I clicked in some automations going well over 50 cents and chopped it up, which is something James did on songs like Radio Silence. That's fire, but it's this next trick that takes things to another level. First, I recorded some vocals, then I duplicated them and pitched them up by 7 semitones. But surely that's way off key now. Well, yes and no. Because we're using a major scale, pitching something up by 7 or down by 5 turns the melody into the relative minor key, which is the closest minor scale to B major in our case. On top of that, I added a couple of extra layers inspired by James's work on Blonde, where they chopped Frank's spoken word into rhythm and then reversed these background vocals. Now, you might have noticed that those vocals actually sound almost identical to James himself, and that's because I used LALAL.AI's new voice cloner to clone his voice. For me, this was the perfect way to see if my track really was comparable to James Blake's work. Now, you can use the cloner to replicate your own voice or anything you like. It's great for producers if you want to test out a specific sound that you're going for. All you need to do is put 10 to 50 minutes of raw audio and just pay a one-time fee to have complete access to it. You can check that out using the link below. Our next technique is all about drums, and it's something James uses to never run out of unique bounces. In this interview, he showcased a specific plugin.
On my screen right now is just a bunch of loops of drums that I've made for other tracks. But Geist is kind of chopping them into, you know, like whatever the tempo is currently.
But we can do that with stock VSTs. So first, I made a drum loop using short, tight sounds, which is a huge staple of James's sound. Once we had that loop, I put it in Fruity Slicer and selected dull auto slicing. It's important to do it like this because the chops are more unique rather than just your typical on-beat slices. After that, I basically created a perk loop using those chops and built a new drum bounce around it. Now, that was a really quick and easy trick, but next, we're going to dive into the world of James Blake's synths. To To put it simply, James uses synths to take the listener on a journey. But before we really get into it, we need a foundation. What you heard in Wilhelm's screen is a very simple synth, with one key distinction. It's super thin. Typically, people use big, rich sounds, but James did the opposite to leave more room for his voice. So I put both a bass and synth key in mono. A big part of taking the listener on a journey is introducing new elements without taking you out of the song. Two different synths come in a bar early, each one panned to a different side. This subtly introduces both a new frequency range and it opens up the track in terms of stereo width. Then we introduced our third section a bar early, bringing in a choir, and also using another really cool trick James used on Radio Silence to transform a basic synth pad into something totally different. As you can hear, it went from pad to ARP. But why don't we just use a new sound instead? Using the same sound but in a different form gives the track so much more cohesion. Here's how you can do it. I automated the ARP on off. I also automated the attack and filter frequency to change the dynamics of the beat. For our last technique, I want to set you guys a challenge. James broke down that song on this podcast, and there's a specific clip where he talks about how it all started.
And a modular synth is kind of like, there's more of a sense of curating something coming in rather than actually composing like you would the piano or whatever.
I love this sentence. With modular synths, you're forced to curate what's given to you as opposed to creating from scratch. So I wanted to set myself and you guys a challenge. Go on Splice or in your own files and find any random bits of audio. Then force yourself to incorporate those into whatever you're working on. For our beat, I got these 3 modular synth loops. First, I chopped the bass, time stretched it to make it longer, and pitched different notes to create a bass line. Then I wanted to use the other 2 sounds to create some glitchy textures. So I put them on the same mixer and intricately chopped them to make a new melody. It felt like I was putting the pieces to a puzzle together. James has been making music for so long that he needs these little challenges to spark new creativity. And I think every producer should do the same.